right, count down. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first official live stream of Black Women in Corporate America with your host and very special guest, Zara Northover. So excited to have her here. Really excited to have you guys join us. This was a little bit impromptu, but felt really compelled and really thought it was important to do this because we are standing 10 toes down with Zara on this. Okay, yes, we are praying, we are claiming victory. We are super excited to have her here. We wanted to give you all the opportunity to ask some questions. And of course, she's going to share some of her story with us because I know for some of you this may be very new, but we've been rocking with her for a little bit. And so we're really excited to have her on. And so let me stop running my mouth and I'm going to turn it over to Zara. Zara, please take it away.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for tuning in, whether now or later. My name is Zara Northover. I am a 2008 Olympian, Jamaican Olympian, because I am a Jamaican and American,
Yes,
born here in Florida,
right.
Broward General, but currently living here in Detroit and absolutely loving it. I have a brand called Moving in Faith. This is my brand. I am an entrepreneur. I'm also a business development consultant. As we all do, we have to have multiple gigs and we have a lot of skills that we have to use to make sure that whether we are not at a corporate job or not, we are able to still maneuver forward and do some different things. So, but the reason why I'm here today, and some of you may know the story, is that I'm in the midst of a race discrimination and retaliation lawsuit. So the retaliation lawsuit is before the Michigan Supreme Court. I just go straight into it. I worked at Rocket Mortgage as a mortgage banker for about since 2015. Yeah, 2015. I actually think it started 2014. But was there quite a while, before really kind of encountering any of these actions, and started off with face, my name, my likeness, right? The Olympian,
Yeah.
the girl that's energetic
Mhm.
and, always giving ideas and love my clients, helped hunt, probably thousands by the time I left, get into homes across the nation, have built lots of strong relationships that I still have today. And as I see, we're at about 700 signatures, and from whether I know you or I don't know you, it just speaks volumes,
Yeah.
to feel seen, to feel
Yeah.
heard, to feel believed, right? I think that's the
Yes.
biggest thing is I encountered a situation at work, right? I was threatened. I was told if I continue down this path, it won't end well for me, all because I was advocating for protected classes. This is around the time of George Floyd and everything that was taking place. And, every company is talking about, we want more diversity. We want all these things. And
Yeah.
so when you start tapping into your network, because you're smart, a lot of smart
Right.
people, and
Mhm.
then you start putting some email per our conversation. I thought we said we were looking for diverse talent, and I sent over these people, and those types of exchanges often leads to targets, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, to be honest, naively, right? I didn't know, right? I wasn't
Right.
thinking I was, I needed to be careful of how I held people accountable of the things that they said they were
Yeah.
going to do. I was just thinking that I was a team member, an employee that worked really hard to
Yeah.
obtain the level of respect that I did, and notoriety around the company, that if I saw something that could be fixed to make it better,
Yeah.
it was a no-brainer. I was just going to say something and hope that it would get better, and I think that's the part that continues to still blow my mind, because even when it's like, whew, you don't expect it.
Yeah.
You don't want to believe it, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to believe that these things will happen, that you will go from office pet to office threat if you're not
Yep.
careful, right? And it's finding that manager. I always tell people it's not the whole company, right?
Yeah.
It's individuals within a company, that the company is responsible to hold people accountable. Absolutely, they are, right? But
That's the
it's
problem.
you get the bad manager,
Yeah.
the bad apple of the bunch at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important to have this conversation. And we've had it before, but it continues to happen. So we have to keep talking about it. And so that's why, when you and I have been having these conversations, we've been, trying to make some noise in our little corner of the woods, and so to speak. And so putting this together and just the idea of this 1,000 Voices for Justice, because we really have this, you have this amazing petition that you started, and we're just trying to amplify it. And to your point, you're over 700 so far. To me, that is amazing. That just speaks to how much your story resonates for people and how important it is for us to be heard. And so we want to get to, to the finish line. Our goal is 1,000, but we're hoping
Absolutely.
for more,
Yeah,
of course.
the petition
And
will be
so,
ongoing, honestly, as I continue.
yes,
But as I prepare my responses and certain, there's deadlines throughout this. And that's even
yes,
part of the reason why I look forward to having more of these discussions live, because we're not necessarily
yeah,
fortunate enough to know about too many people that are going through like we know people that have gone through some
right,
stuff now, right? But some people are not
of
necessarily
course,
comfortable, rightfully so, to speak about it in real
right,
time. Some people are tied to a gag order, right? And some people are with,
yep,
attorneys where the same thing, like that freedom is not necessarily there to speak on certain things, or it's not
right,
advised. So, I know that it's always taking a chance, because anything you say or do could be held and used against you. They'll want to paint me, and they
right,
will want to paint this picture as if I'm doing stuff to
yeah,
seek attention. And then I had to sit with that and ask myself, like,
yes,
I was somebody before starting to work at this company, right? Like, and it was okay when they wanted to use my face and likeness to use it to create a documentary and to empower and
of
motivate
course,
people and minorities and everyone, right?
hmm,
But now it's a problem if I want to advocate and
yep,
educate, right? Like, it's not even like I'm just doing this for show. Like, I'm trying to educate and empower
right,
people so they know their rights, so they don't end up in the same situation.
yeah. Yeah, and to your point, something that you brought up that I wanted to highlight a little bit about the idea that some people can't speak, right, because they're under a gag order or an NDA. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, because you made a decision, before you took this on, that allowed you to still keep your voice and to really amplify. And I would love for you to talk about that more, especially for folks that may be on the cusp of doing something similar.
So you always know that when somebody says, "Oh, I signed an NDA and I can't talk about it." Oftentimes people will say like, "Oh, well, it's just standard. It just means that you can't talk about, um, you can't disparage the company." But what does that even mean, right? How far does that mean? Does it mean that if you say,
Right.
"I don't like the company," is that now considered you disparaging? Like, can they come back to you and ask you for all your
Yeah.
money, right? If you think you're having a conversation with
Right.
just a nice stranger, right, one day, and
Yeah.
they tell you that they're going to work at Rocket, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man,
Right.
they say, what's your experience like? But then you can't say anything,
Mm,
right? Because it's you
right.
didn't talk about necessarily your experience, good or bad, in certain details, right, throughout, like, that for sure is public
Right.
record. It's just one of those things where it's like, do you want to be tethered to a piece of paper of like, what can I really say,
Mm,
or what can I really do? um it's
right.
it's it's mind-boggling. And I get emotional thinking about it, because even in this process now, there are people that I have supported on their journey, whether it's through advocacy, or them standing
Yeah.
up to this company and other companies. And there's certain ones with this company that, right, they signed an NDA, and knowingly, like, right, we know that it was going to be that, but they can't support me the way they would want to support me, right? They fear signing the petition. They fear sharing, right? Like, like any content that I might put up.
Right.
And to think like, and I've had friends call and be like, I'm really, like, I love you and I would do anything and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. Like, and it's that
Yeah.
weird feeling, right? It's that, but I was there for you. And it's like, like, but I also understand, right? And
Yeah.
thankfully, that's why it means so much, right? To see 700 names of people. I mean, Nicole, I just met you, right? Like, like, for people that I don't know, to
Yeah.
to connect to not just me, but my story, and to know that we've all experienced this universal pain in some way, that says we're going to come together and
Yeah.
just one, talk about it, acknowledge that it exists, and move forward to try to hold people accountable to this. It's that to me screams
Yeah,
volumes, and I'm just grateful that we're able to have this conversation. Like, I wish these were conversations I had prior to starting corporate, right? Because I would not have. I can tell you
absolutely.
this much: I would not have been in this situation, right? Like we would have sorted all this out from before. I'd probably be
Yeah,
rising up in the company as somebody's VP right now because we would have not gotten here. I would have held
yeah,
somebody accountable in a different way, which would have probably better
yeah,
protected myself because I would have known the right things to say to HR. By the time I got to HR, I would have known the right things to save in terms of
right.
documentation, right? Like, I had a lot. And for
Yeah,
some, I have a lot of documentation. Let's talk about that. Like, I actually have a lot of
right.
documentation, and I wasn't even able to get to the point of sharing the evidence to prove, right? Like
Right.
my case, to support my case, because of
Yeah,
just how hard the judicial system can be to navigate, right? And
yeah,
when you're up against a corporation that has expendable resources, right, that's valued in the billions,
yeah,
they got lawyers, they
yeah,
got top-notch lawyers, but that's why I have this shirt that says "Moving in Faith, God makes no mistake," because
yeah,
I'm not like, I have a brain, right? Like, and God qualifies the called. So, I mean, if it meant going to the law library, going to Chat
yeah.
GPT, utilizing AI resources and tools to look things up, listening
Hey,
to going on LinkedIn and tapping into lawyers that
yeah,
share different insights to their cases, finding just any way to learn so I could advocate for myself. Because at the end
right.
of the day, nobody knows your story better than you, right? Like, and even when yeah,
Absolutely.
even when time passes by, you may forget, like, like, there's nobody knows it better than you. So it's like you have to express it to somebody else for them to understand, when you have an attorney to
Yeah,
advocate. So once you learn the laws and the case laws that could support you, I felt like through briefing and filing motions, I did a good job, like, not being an attorney.
yeah,
I did a good job to advocate and say, this is the reason why that, this should be overturned, or this is the reason why this should have never been
yeah.
dismissed.
Yeah, and to your point, in case for those of you who don't know, you're representing yourself. Which is, let's not bury the lead here. Okay. So yeah, all of the things. Okay. So you're out here pro se, you're a pro se litigant. And for those of you who don't know, that means you are representing yourself. So when you're talking about, Chat GPT, going to the law library, that is because you are the attorney for yourself. And that's not a small thing. So folks can, and I think that's also encouraging because some people could be thinking, well, I can't go up against these people. I can't afford an attorney. Maybe you don't need one.
The thing that I can say, a piece of advice I had gotten along this journey was, when you start to think about it, even as an entrepreneur, you could respect and understand that brick and mortar businesses, when you have employees, you have bills, right?
Yeah.
Requirements. So any
Oh
attorney,
yeah.
even if they take you on contingency, or if you're paying, at the end of the day, like, you're
Yeah.
going up against an organization that has expendable resources. But what I did not know,
Yes.
Nicole, when starting this, was lawsuits actually themselves don't cost a lot of money. It's the lawyers, right, that cost a lot of money. It's a lot of time, and it's a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's
But, like,
important.
I think to file the, like, for example, with the Michigan Supreme Court, like, it was like
Hmm.
$375 to
Yeah.
file for the claim. So yeah, it's a pretty penny to someone, to,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's irrelevant as to what's
Yeah.
expensive, what's not. But 375 versus 375 an hour, right? Like, to pay a lawyer, or
I mean, that's a
275
big
a
difference.
lawyer, is a big difference. But did it take
Yeah.
me a whole week? You know what I mean? To live in the library 8 hours a day, like, to figure out, a
Yeah.
paragraph, maybe, right? You know what I mean? Like, but figure out a paragraph to write. But the reality is, like, it's the time and the effort. If you have it,
Yeah.
the lawsuit itself doesn't cost it's a lot of money, right? Like, and I think
Yeah.
that's the part that blew my mind going through this process. To file a motion costs
Yeah.
$100, maybe 75. Like, and it's not like you're filing a motion
Mm.
every day, right? Like, so it's
Right.
typically, the initial petition to say, I want to bring somebody to court, and they get served.
Yeah.
It's then after that, then they'll write a response, and then you could write a response their response.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you file in a motion to strike something they said or a motion to add something, right? So
Right.
you mean altogether, maybe you might spend 1,000, 1,500, but in the grand scheme of how sometimes it makes people make you feel like you can't
Yeah.
afford it, that's the stigma that they want us to feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the truth of the matter is, most attorneys require that as a retainer.
Absolutely.
Just to even have the conversation, after the initial conversation, they're going to tell you, you need to put this much up front. And I'm saying this as someone who actually vetted multiple attorneys because I was going through a similar situation. So sometimes you're going to have to, even to have the conversation, that's going to be needed up front. So if you think about $1,000 for the, potentially for the duration, that's not bad. That's probably something that's a little bit more attainable,
Yeah.
right? A little bit more accessible than saying 1,000, maybe 1,000 per day.
Yeah. And
Sometimes, I
and
mean,
those are the
that's what they work
and those
on.
are like those overall costs, right? Of course, you're going to have if you're the
Yeah,
type of person that needs to print something out in order to like go through it, then yeah, I mean, you might be looking at going
yeah.
to FedEx and spending $300 to print out some
Mhm.
paper because,
Oh yeah,
trust me, the other side for sure is probably going to send you hundreds,
oh
hundreds
yeah,
of documents because they want to, that's the goal of like trying to bury you, right? Like, so therefore you can't sift through and
yeah,
find what you're trying to look for, or your employee profile, if you've been somewhere for 10 years, is
yeah.
hundreds of papers. So if you're not the person that could read it on the computer and press control find to kind of skim through and look around on stuff, yeah, I mean,
Right,
you'll spend money in those areas, right? Like, so there will be costs,
right,
but it's one of those things that's not as significant as if you have to
right,
pay an attorney. And don't get me wrong, trust me, I would have been glad to like, I didn't have the money, right? Like, and that is the situation for many people.
right,
And those lawyers that will take you on contingency, because there are lawyers. When I first started this, I did have an attorney that took me on contingency. So they will, but and what that
right,
means is they don't make money, right, unless you make money. So basically, until either you settle the case
right.
or you win the case, and are provided an award. But the thing with all those things, sometimes there is a pressure, right? What is your non-negotiable? My non-negotiable has always been my silence, right? Like I
Mm,
can't, as I was a motivational speaker before going to Rocket, while I was Rocket, and after.
yeah,
And I can't imagine not being able to speak about 8 years, 8 whole years of my life because I might be in fear of the wrong thing,
yeah,
or like, like, or saying like, being just tethered to a piece of paper. Absolutely not.
yeah. And that's huge. And I think sometimes when you have to weigh the cost, to your point, like what is it worth to you? Is it worth, okay, you're going to settle for X amount of dollars, but you'll never be able to speak about this again, and then potentially somebody else can go through a similar situation? You have to really weigh the cost, and I think that's what's so powerful about what you're doing, because so many of us were silenced or didn't. And it wasn't even just a matter, because I look at myself, it wasn't just a matter that I was threatened or told, you can't move forward with this. It's just I physically, mentally could not continue, and I needed to just say, I need to walk away from this and just cut ties. And so a lot of times we are so weary of the process that we give up. And that's where I found myself. And so that's why when I heard about your story and we connected, it wasn't a no-brainer for me, because I saw myself in you. I saw the struggle. I heard my stories overlaid on yours, and I think that is what's resonating with so many people. That is why you have over 700 people right now who are saying we're going to stand with you, because we have been there before. So I think, to your point, it's really, I mean, you're the one fighting, but you're fighting for so many of us right now. And that's what's so powerful and so meaningful. And so I really appreciate you for that. And I want to go back a little bit to pull a thread to what you were referring to, because at some point you did have an attorney. And so, but at one point you made the decision not to. So I know that you said, they were on contingency, but did something happen that actually prevented you from moving forward? Can you
Yeah,
talk to
and
us a little bit
ultimately I
about
can
that?
share because it became part of the record, right? Like, this is where I go to say,
Mhm.
like, anything that happens on the journey, anything that's said somewhere, right? Like that potentially can be used, and they'll try to spin it and use it against
Yeah.
you. And we had gone through the process. We actually, the first case, the first lawsuit, that's the lawsuit where, and actually, it's right over here. Just grab it real quick. That's
Perfect.
the lawsuit where
is that.
I was given the gorilla card, right? Like, this is the suit that, inside it said, I see a great year in your future, or bananas. It's unclear. Happy birthday anyway. And I was still working at the company. And I think that's something that people have to remember. Like, I was still there, I was still an employee. And still trying to make it work, right? I went to HR hoping that in good faith that I could get right, I could get transferred. We could figure out what we need to do in order to address the situation moving forward. So I had the attorney. I had more than one. So the first set, because this started basically in February of 2021. So around that time, it's COVID. So everybody, there's so much happening. It was between George Floyd and now COVID. The world was at this very emotional space. And so when trying to go to the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to file a complaint, I was able to get the inquiry in online, but then you have to actually have an interview process. That's where the problem usually happens, because you check every day. It's like no appointment available. Sometimes it takes months, and there's limitations. So typically when something happens, you usually, I think, some states might be 180. I believe it's about 180 days. So I would double check, obviously depending on where you are, and to get the complaint. And that's from when the act actually, pretty much happens. So once you get the complaint in, then now it could take you 1 month or 3 months to potentially speak to somebody. And then while you're in that time frame, they're going to deliberate and go through, and they'll probably issue you what's called a right to sue. And you do need a right to sue in order to bring forth federal claims. You do not need a right to sue in order to just, bring forth state claims. So that's kind of where one of the big questions for the Supreme Court, which is why I really do have a feeling, I do have a positive feeling that we could have a chance of making this and getting granted review, because I thought the first case where I had two attorneys, it was two women, but they weren't really employment lawyers, right? It was I was in a mental state that was not good at the time. My hair was falling out. I was stressed out. Lots of things were happening. I'm emotional because when you're still working and an action happens to you, now you're like writing emails and sending stuff and trying to cover your butt and like checking people and then crying in the corner and talking, right? There's a million things happening, and then the part of advocating for yourself internally is like a whole full-time job. Right, because on top of the work that you also have to get done, so mentally I was not, that was a tough space to be, and so when someone referred some lawyers to me, I was like, okay, but didn't know to check like how many employment law, stuff that they've done, and in my mind, I was just like, well, a lawyer's kind of a lawyer, right? But that's almost like saying I'm going to go to a gynecologist to get my eyes checked, right? So the reality is it's not the same. It's not the same, but you live and you learn. So, the company did offer, right? Settlements. We had those conversations, but it didn't go through because not signing away my silence. And if we can't, that's something that we couldn't agree on. So, those two attorneys basically said, hey, this is bigger than me, right? So basically we advise you to go see if you can find somebody that could support you and help you kind of get where you need to go. So then I went to the next. So the other the other side, right, tries to paint me this picture as if I'm like difficult to work with and, an angry Black woman, right? That's now, but that's not the case at all, right? There was a mutual understanding there. And then the next attorney, same thing. We started working, and hard for the core, right? I think this is a great case. You go through deposition, certain things you start to question yourself, because you're like, well, why aren't you asking that question? Why didn't that happen? How come you didn't do that? And I'm like, I'm not the attorney, but ChatGPT is saying this, right? You're fact checking a little bit, and all you could do though, but you're trying trying to be respectful because you have somebody that's representing you.
Right.
So, but yeah, so then that goes through, and that's the case though now, the retaliation case. So this retaliation case is filed by the second attorney, and but I go through the proper channels because I come back from work, right? I come back from medical leave after receiving this card, after being threatened. I go on medical leave, so now I come back to work. And in coming back to work, that's all of a sudden where my team is being dissolved all of a sudden, right? Like, I mean, like no notice. I'm right, a couple days, right? Like, you know, I'm the day that I say I'm coming back basically is the day that you know, that these talks start happening. Like, wait, she's really coming back. So what are we about to do with her, right? Like, I mean, like, and
yeah.
So that happens, and then what takes place now is I'm sitting here like, what do you mean my team is being dissolved? Then okay, like you would think that if I was a successful purchase banker, I brought $40 million in a year to the company, then if I'm going to go back to purchase banking, but that's not what's afforded to me. And we all know that around the time of George Floyd and the COVID, yeah, I mean, rates were also at like an all-time high. We were at like 8 and 9%, like 7, 8, 9%, you know, having just come off of 1.99, 2.5%. So refinance was not something I necessarily trained for. So that's where the transfer, right, the forced transfer comes into play. That's where you know, microaggressions start taking place. You know, actually a humiliation, because my team members are like, "Yo, like thought you was coming to purchase," and people are like the purchase queen, and you know, and then I'm like, "No, this is where they sent me." And at that time, you're like, "Do I tell them that I'm in this lawsuit? Am I supposed to? What? Like, how do you live?
What am I
like how am I supposed to act? What do I say? What can I say? What can I say? You don't really know, and you don't get a full manual of like, this is how you be the perfect client either, right? Like, so there's so many unknowns as you're navigating and working at the space that put you in this position in the first place, right? Like, and so while you're there, you just, you know, like for me, that I had to learn, right? Now I'm starting to like, let me get these emails that I need to get, right? Like, you know, let me get the evidence, right? That like, that I know that I have, right? In some place to be able to showcase that this doesn't make sense, that this is retaliation at its core, at its finest. I file a lawsuit, I come back to work, you get rid of my team. And then you don't put me in a comparable, like, right, I'm now experiencing roughly about a $20,000 pay cut at that. You're bringing me back as a new hire when I was already at the company for 7 years, right? Like, that doesn't even make sense. And I've seen exceptions. I've been there so long that I've seen exceptions. I've seen all the things. And I was on an elite product manager team where I was having meetings with chief risk officer, chief revenue officer. So it's like, I know what can and cannot be done. I'm not new to this. And but you know, you still try to hold your own. So yeah, it's embarrassing to go back and be like, I'm making $15 an hour, all right, when I was at basically six figures, right? Like, so this is where you start to just navigate though. And I'm a child of God first off, and I'm also have an Olympic spirit. I know what's happening to me is wrong, but I also look around and I know that this type of stuff has happened to others. So was I going to be an advocate and have the courage to choose me? Or was I going to, you know, kind of just go get another job, like, and let it pass me by and not do anything? And even though I built my career here, my face and my likeness, it was still being used. People were still watching the documentary and reaching out to me. You know, so it was like this perfect chaos. It was like this chaotic storm that you're just sitting in and trying to figure out, like, where do I go? Do I go downstairs in the basement? Do I go and board up the windows first? Like, I mean, like, how do I navigate?
Where do I start?
So, you know, in doing those things, I had an attorney, and so what I can say is the attorney navigated through, had the conversations. You know, I knew somebody else that was in a lawsuit at the same time, same company, right? Like, you know, so it's like, you know that there's things happening, right? And it's unfortunate. It's like, why are we going through this, right? And there was another woman, and I'm getting messages from other people that are going through something similar, right? Like, you know, and that's where you just get, or you have conversations, I should say. You're frustrated. And in that frustration, for me, that's where I ended up at church, Bible study, Sunday school, like all the things. And I remember the sign that said bigger than me. And I knew that God was calling me to this because he said it's just time for our people to have the knowledge so they don't have to perish. And that's kind of where I've been like, I have to be a walking testimony. Do I feel like maybe I should have gone more public sooner in all of this? But then it's like, I have to give myself grace too. I was navigating. I have to figure out how I could breathe, how I could work, how I could try to find work.
You were doing the best you could.
Like, you know, so, but now that I'm going through it, I'm just in a better position to be a blueprint for someone else, to help someone understand the process if they call and have questions, or and prepare to even get dialogue out there, right? Like, you know, with content of these conversations.
And to your point, and you know, we talked about this the last time you and I spoke, where, and I mentioned this, like sometimes you have to be the one to go through the hell for someone else, right? And so you're essentially paving the path for someone who's on the cusp or about to walk through something similar. And so that's why your story is so powerful. I want to mention, because this comes up quite a bit, and you mentioned it, and I want to make sure we reiterate it because it's super, super important, about the EEOC and filing that claim, because that is something that I face as well. So something that that may be lost on a lot of folks, especially if you're not familiar with the process, is, as you said, the clock starts the moment the incident happens. So the clock doesn't start when you decide to file the claim. And that's what's super important to keep in mind. The clock starts the moment it happens. So the moment, for example, when you got the card, the clock started then. So it wasn't when you said, okay, in a couple of months, I'm going to file it now. Then you already lose the window. And the average state only gives you 180 days. That's not a lot of time. That's about 6 months. Some states will give you more time, but I think that's so, so important that you mentioned, because you need to file it the moment it happens. The moment it happens. And I know I say that a lot, it's like a broken record, but it's so important because time is not on your side. So it doesn't matter if you're still working at the company, you need to file the claim the moment the incident happens. That is when the clock starts. And so the more time you wait, the less time you have. So that's something super important that you mentioned that I thought was really important to drive home. A lot of folks are not aware of that.
And the thing that it's to keep in mind is, it's like, you know, definitely make sure. I think the powerful thing for me was having a therapist, right? So having someone that I could also navigate and have this conversation with, right? Like having a tribe, like, you know, I created the email Pro Se Besties, and I have, you know, like something has been birthed out of this now, right? But the reality is I had to have a tribe that, like, you know, I could connect with and talk to, and not everybody's going to understand, right? Or want to hear, right? Like, you know, and because it's a lot. This has become my life for the last 5 years. It's a part of my life for the last 5 years. So when it comes to the EEOC stuff, it's also like not being afraid to, there are some platforms on Facebook that, you know, I would tap into and ask questions. And the thing is, you can reach out to employment lawyers. Like, they do have free consultations. So it's have the conversation, explain what's happening in real time. Because even if you're not going to file a claim, you could talk to them and they might say, yeah, you do have a claim, or they might say you don't have a claim, but at least you'll have validation and an answer. And they'll probably say, okay, when you go to HR, say this, or when you go to HR, have this conversation and tell me what they say, or make these notes, take, you know, have a journal, start documenting everything, what you know, BCC yourself on some of the emails that you send out, or take a picture, right, of it, or screenshot, whatever it is, as to how to make sure you have the things to protect yourself. The thing is, hopefully you don't have to use it. That's what I tell people. If something is uncomfortable and you see something, or if you're in a one-party consent state, and you know what I mean, like, and you can record, just make sure it's a one-party consent state, and you can, and you know, there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself. Doesn't mean you're going to use it, but I rather, and I say this all the time, I rather have and not need than need and not have it.
That part. Yeah, that is so important. Or even something as simple as making sure that you're taking any off the record conversations and putting them on the record. And that can be super simple. You can just send an email recap. If someone says, hey, let me talk to you really quick for a minute, or, let's just have a quick chat. Those are always the famous ways to have conversations off the record. Just circle right back and say, hey, just wanted to recap what we discussed and make sure that I'm clear on what you stated and what I understood. That's just a really beautiful way to get things on the record, because what they will try more than anything is to have as many off the record conversations as they can, because then it's just your word against theirs.
Absolutely.
And that's where they get the powers, where they can take, these kind, oh, well, according or allegedly, there were multiple times that there were conversations that I had, but because I did not have them on the record, they could just have said, they easily, and they did say that that did not occur.
Yeah.
And they're okay lying. You have to be clear about that. So HR has no problem lying about something.
I think it's just a reminder. HR is there to protect the bottom line. It's there to protect the company. At the end of the day, that's
absolutely.
And then
they're not there to protect you at all.
Absolutely. So that's the reason why,
And that's important.
but what we're taught growing up, like, oh yeah, go to HR if something bad happens. All right. It's not the HR's, and I don't want to give all HR a bad rap. Like, people are nice, they're doing their job, but at the end of the day, like, that's their goal. Like, but can I say that, yeah, if multiple people keep going about the same leader or same person, eventually you will see that change, but it is our responsibility for multiple people to keep going and to document, because then you'll see a change, right? If we don't keep going, then it's almost like I'm the first person every time. Like, the next first person is the first person. They're not. They're probably like the 10th.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's important. And I definitely am not here to knock HR at all in that sense, but I want to speak clear. I think it's really about making sure you're going in with the eyes wide open. So at the end of the day, they are there to protect the company. So it's not to say that they're horrible people and then they're devious or whatever the case is. They're there to protect the company and the bottom line of the company. So it is your responsibility. Like, you need to go in there and protect yourself. And I think that's where it becomes really powerful, when you are making sure that you're having those on the record conversations. Just do a quick email recap. If you're feeling like, oh, well, I want to make sure that I can go back and refer to this, that's just a really easy way to do it. And follow up if you don't get an initial response. I've done that multiple times. Hey, just wanted to follow up on my initial email, just to make sure you're getting something on the record, some acknowledgement of what was discussed, because they're not going to provide you anything to then be able to go back to, oh yeah, here you go. You can use this against your case, that you're filing, because that's not their role in there. And that's so important to let folks know. And I think enough has happened over the years, of course, and recently, that for folks to understand that is a clear distinction where the allegiance for HR lies, but it's still important to drive home, because some folks may just be starting out. This might be year one for you in corporate America. You might have just graduated. And so that's something you should always.
And the crazy thing is, even when I look at this whole situation, is that there's part of me that's like, this didn't have to end up like this, like, right? Like, and actually through negotiation, it wasn't that like, I wouldn't suggest, like, this is where it's like, all right, well, hire me to come back to be a consultant to speak to the HR team, right? Like, I mean, and because this literally could have been, it did not have to end up here, right? It ended up here because nobody wants to take accountability, right? Like, and I think that's, and it's just expected, right, that we will accept any settlement. It's expected that we're not going to know our worth. It's expected that, like that. It's like that nobody is going to stand up to a giant. But eventually, there's always that one. Ironically, I saw that today was the day that Shirley Chisholm became the first Black woman, right, that entered the race to become president today. Significance of today, decades ago. But it's always going to take one. And you best believe there's going to be a Black woman that's going to be that one, right? Like, and always will.
Always.
There's always going to be one. When that one goes through, she's going to reach right on back to get the next one.
Yeah, and I mean we've been talking about that a lot, and I've been driving that point home, the power of one. And I think, over the years and over months, we see that play out where we have this mindset. I'm just one person. What could I really do? It's just me. Well, how is that going to matter or make a difference? It absolutely makes a difference. I think your petition is proof positive that there is power in one, because that one has been multiplied times 700. And I actually think it's a good time to check and see where we are. So I'm going to check right now and see where we
Yeah, I
are
just,
in
I
our
really
quest.
just appreciate everyone, the openness to have this conversation. I just opened my eyes to see
Yeah.
the power, right, we have when people collectively come together, and
Yes.
it's emotional. Like I'm reading some of the letters that come through, and just or the shared experience of what someone else went through, and I just kept thinking to
Yeah.
myself, well, how many people experience that at their company, right? Like that just didn't say anything. And would it have
Yeah.
been like, would it
A
I
lot.
be in this situation if every woman that went through what I went through prior to me, because I know that there's more than just me, right? Like, I know that there were others, because you hear it
Yeah.
after, right? When you're going
Yeah.
through it, the one thing about going public
Yeah.
is that now everybody calls it, be like, girl, right? Like, yeah, like, let me tell
Me
you, like, right, like,
too. Me
and I
too.
was like, well, why you didn't say nothing? Like, but, and then they look at you and they're like, yeah, because look at you, like, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, look at you now, right? Like
Yeah.
you still in this fight 5 years
Yeah.
later. But I was like, but if everybody that this happened to prior to me went and said something, would I be at this 5 years later?
No. No, that's really to your point. And officially
Okay,
7:07.
okay, we're
Okay.
getting there. We're getting there.
7:07, we're getting closer. Okay, every single signature counts. So thank you to the folks that just went ahead and signed and said we stand with Zara, because we do. Thank you, thank you. And you'll see hovering here, I think it's over here depending on which way you're looking. There's a QR code. Please go ahead and scan that and it'll take you right to the petition. We so appreciate your support. But yeah, to your point, and I think that's what's interesting, because now I'm getting similar conversations now after the dust has settled. I have people messaging me and like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this, or oh my gosh, I had, we ended up doing this and that and the third. And so even though, and I think that's one of those things that's interesting, is that some of us don't get to see what happens, like the retribution of standing up, right? And in my particular situation, I didn't get to see it right away. It really took 2 years. I mean, we're talking, I'm 2 years and change removed from the situation. And I have heard from folks who, like, all of the chickens came home to roost. And, oh, somebody scanned the code. Okay, okay, yay. So, to your point, I think that's what's so powerful in one. If every person speaks up, we end up in such a different place. And that's why I really think it's so important to drive that point home. And, getting, even just having folks here jumping in and out. Hey, look, we're encouraged by the numbers. It doesn't matter if we're in single digits, because every one counts. Every single one counts. And that's why we're really pushing to make that noise. And one other thing I wanted to say before I turn it back over to you, you were sharing about how, oh, I wish I had, maybe I should have spoken up sooner. And I think we always have the power of hindsight.
Yeah.
Like we look back like, oh, if I had just done this or done that. And I think there's two things that I find interesting. One, because I do this a lot when I play back the tape, but I do it with grace now, I think. At least that's what I tell myself. And so even though I play back the tape, I still say to myself, in order to be where I am today, I had to go through that in the exact way that I went through it. And so I don't go back and say, man, if I just done this, if I just did this over here. I'm grateful now for how it went, because that's what led me to today. That's what led to you and I being here on this call and having this conversation and getting people rallied and riled up. And even people saying like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, I'm filing a suit against them as well, against Rocket Mortgage. That's public record, so we can absolutely say their name,
Yep.
okay? So and having folks speak up and say, "Oh, I'm having a similar situation," or "I'm having issue with them." They're, they have all this, negative, perception. But the second thing that I thought was interesting, because I have been trying to like shake some trees, as they say, and reach out to some folks in the media. And what I found interesting, I heard back from one particular outlet that would have potentially gotten some really great visibility. And their response was, because it's a legal matter, we're not really comfortable going wide with that. And I thought, wow, just imagine how many folks are silenced because people don't want to touch something until they have a clear sense of who's winning, right? And I think that's what makes it so much more important that you are speaking up, that you are being vocal about it, because they are, I'm sure, behind the scenes trying to, hoping it goes away. I'm not going to say trying because allegedly, okay,
Yeah.
let's be clear. So, but it's just interesting to see outlets even wanting to shy away from it because they're like, well, yeah, we're not really comfortable. And I think that's unfortunate because this is public record. So this is not something that, you're just, oh, I don't like them. This is 100% happening. And so I think that's why your voice is so important and why we're being vocal and why we do believe every voice matters. And I just, on that rant.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you shared that. And I think this is it. It brings us into a good topic and something that sometimes is hard to talk about because remember how I said this is also the time where you start noticing. You start noticing which friends are sharing and which friends are not. You start noticing which like
Yeah.
which, and you get
Mhm.
it to a certain extent because you know that at the end of the day, Rocket Mortgage does own a lot of, I mean, they own over 100 buildings in Detroit, right? They're affiliated with a lot of
Yeah.
different companies. So people start fearing
Hmm.
like, is retaliation going to happen to me? And that's when I learned
Yeah.
something in law. I learned it's called like the chilling effect, right? How retaliation can continue, right? People may not want to hire you, right?
Yeah.
That's why they say that you could get blackballed in an industry because people may not want to hire you because you
Yeah.
have spoken up against, right, a major entity or um, so it's like you start to notice like I'll see people or people will tell me congratulations, right, or I'm so proud of you, and but just won't, and so that's tough because in my head I keep thinking, if everybody just banded together because you believe it's wrong. It's if you don't believe it's wrong, if you don't believe me,
Mm.
it's you don't believe me,
Yeah.
right? But it's not that you don't believe me. You just don't want to be affiliated with picking a side because you don't necessarily want it to affect. So you don't want to be an ally, right? Like you don't want to be a public ally, I should
Right.
say. And
Right.
and so that's why journalism is interesting to me now because my whole thing is like, well, why wouldn't you want to get the
Yeah.
story in real time and see and follow and see what happens? It's not the
Right.
same. And then you have to say, or is it the same? Because it is the same when you have the president going
Hmm.
before the courts. It is the same when you have the Johnny Depp lawsuit. It
Yeah.
is the same, like, right? There's stories going on right now, Diddy. But
Yeah.
is it the same when you have um, a black woman taking on a major corporation? Maybe
Yeah.
the like, and while I should say like the Olympian doesn't necessarily hold that weight, right, to some people in that sense, but
Yeah.
if I was if I was a well-known gold medalist, like would that have changed if somebody would have wanted to write about this story, right? Or would that have changed even how much they
Yeah.
would have settled, right, like, or offered me, right? Like, so it's these are the things that we also have to look at. It's not
Yeah.
that it's just that this doesn't happen and it can't happen. It's just that people are fearful of the Goliath
Yeah.
in the situation, right?
Oh,
And because of that,
100%.
like that's why
100%.
I am so incredibly thankful, right, for each person. And it's easier for people that are not in the state, right? Because you're just like, I mean, I work for a different company anyway. So, I mean, they ain't about to do nothing to me. Like, like it's just so those people can stand
Right.
up. And that's where the
Right.
it's a beautiful thing to see that ownership of people saying, like, well, I've got you. All right. I think I've seen people from London on
Yeah.
the list, right? And London, people sending me articles of I stood up to racism in my country. And I always have to
Yeah.
remind people, even companies, when somebody files whether it's a Title VII or an Elliott Larson Act, any kind of protected activity. So when you file a lawsuit because you were discriminated against, you were harassed, you were retaliated against, whistleblowing, any of those types of things, it's legal protected activity under the federal law. So a company should not that's why I was able to go back to work. You could sue them and still be at work because I'm technically supposed to be protected by legal protected activity. That's the reason why we're before the Supreme Court again, right? Because I went back to work after filing, then experienced new harm, right? And it's the new harm that they tried to dismiss based off of the first case. Right, not off its own merits, and the own merits would have been, let's go through discovery, let Zara provide, right, like all the documentation that she has to prove that this took place, and then if you're able, you dismiss it at that point, you dismiss it at that point, or it goes before a jury, and a jury hears, right, the story and then makes a decision. But this particular judge, right, decided to take basically the defendant's word and dismiss a case that really shouldn't have been dismissed. And I'm alleging that, and I'm standing on that because that's my truth, right? Like, that's what I know to be true, because if you look at the law says that when a plaintiff brings forth, a case, that you're supposed to take things most favorable to the plaintiff. So I basically am a Black woman, so that I was able to document, and that's fact, right? I am saying that they retaliated against me because I filed a lawsuit and then they dissolved my team, right? So they're of course going to try to say it was like, oh, the downturn, oh, this, but there's causal effect, right? It was less than 2 weeks. like it wasn't like something where it was like a whole year had passed and then this took place, right? We're talking about months here. And so and then there was a pay cut. And then you send me, if I've made 40 million for a company working purchase, why would you send me to something I haven't done and then not train me properly, right? There's way too many things that, take place. And it's not that I'm not trying to try this case, but I'm sharing these details because it educates you to know, right? To take notice for yourself. Why are they saying all of a sudden, like, hey, we think you might be better here? Really? Because I was the top here, right? I was the one that was leading this space, or I was one of the best, or hey, you did a whole documentary on me, right? Or hey, we really need you have to start to notice. And if it doesn't make sense and it's in your gut for a reason, it probably doesn't. It doesn't make sense, right? And there's a underlying cause because they wanted me to quit, right? But I wasn't.
That's what
they were hoping for, but they were gonna have to get rid of me because I wasn't leaving. Because at the end of the day, for me, it was also that accountability piece. Like, you don't get to that man's threat, right? When William Banfield said, if you continue down this path, it won't end well. It was already coming true. Right. The fact that my hair is falling out, the fact that, I get this 2 weeks later, the fact that I end up on medical leave, I come back and my team's being dissolved. Like, it was already coming true, but I had some power still. And that was to make the decision to fight back, to choose me, to have the courage to stand up and know that that this is bigger than me, right? And my voice, they were using my voice to empower and educate people before. They were using my voice to expand and make money for the company, right? So why not use my own voice for me, right? Like, this is who I am. And also, like you said, the narrative piece, because a lot of articles and people don't want to necessarily take on writing because they fear it. Even media houses fear, like, I'm not about to write about them and then have them come send me a cease and desist, right? Or have them come send, that's what a lot of people fear. That's what it comes down to. They have large PR teams and crisis teams and different things like that. But you just hope that the right people come together and say, I'm putting the story out, right? Because the same people are not writing the story, the first one's knocking, right? Like, if I do get the, God's willing, I do get the reverse.
Hello to the media folks that are driving past. Okay, you can break this. You can have breaking news right here, exclusive. Okay, here's your official invitation. Okay, we're just, and I'm not gonna say just little old me because someone cured me of that, but we are just one piece of the puzzle. And I think, to your point, what's been really interesting, and I think and I know it was God that orchestrated the way that I wrote this post, that people are resonating with. And really, it just, the words that
Yeah.
came to me is just that question. What if it was your daughter? What if it was your friend? What if it was your mother? What if it was you? And that post has gone, my version of viral. It's not going to be hundreds of thousands because
Yeah.
that's a story for another day with the algorithm and
Yeah.
Black issues, but we're not going to talk about that. But what I found interesting is there's so many folks that are in the journalism field that are associated with media outlets that are tracking this, that are viewing this post, but that step to say, hey, we want to cover this story, that hasn't happened because there's a risk, there's a fear. And, even in having these conversations, all of us take a risk standing up, because maybe your job has a tentacle somewhere, or there is something that happens, even just resharing the post. Not everyone has the luxury to do that. But we're asking and we're saying, hey, you may not be able to reshare this post, but you can sign that petition. You can absolutely sign it, and you can actually sign it. You don't have to have your name show up on the feed if you don't want that, but the signature is what's so important, because that is what's going to help people to take notice. So it's not just about, hey, the Supreme Court. That is, of course, huge. The Michigan Supreme Court is a big deal, but it's also about what comes next. How do we keep making this snowball effect, keep going and picking up steam, so that the right folks do hear about this and do pick up this story? Because it's still baffling to me, and I mentioned this to you before. How is it that not? How is this not on CNN? How is this not on, like, just any of the local outlets? Why is this not being talked about? Because it is 100% public record. And to your point, I mean, I was just on jury duty, and there were reporters in the back of the courtroom that were taking notes and posting about this one case that wasn't even national news. And so you have this humongous company that is just everywhere, right? Everyone's heard of Rocket Mortgage, yet no one is talking about this case.
It's been going on for
Why is
5 years,
that?
going 5 years come December, and I stated every chance I get, like, I'm not a quitter, like, and I believe in justice. I believe in, my pastor talked about, one of the pastors in my church yesterday said, what would you sell God or God's word for? What's the price that you put on God or God's word? I'm like, I ain't selling Jesus. Like I ain't selling God. He ain't for sale. That's priceless, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, but that's literally, God brought me to this, so I know He's going to see me through this. I mean, it's already a win. The
Absolutely.
fact that 700 people signed that documentation. The fact that we have
Absolutely.
14,000 views on LinkedIn, right, listening to the
Yes.
story, and people sharing and sharing their stories, right? Like there is something. I remember reading Jackie Abrams, and people keep tagging her book Hush
Mm-hmm.
Money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I've purchased your book as well, like Black Womaning, like these things, right? Like like these
Yeah.
things were created out of our pain, right? Were created out of the experience, but then they turned into a blueprint for someone
Yeah.
else. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm grateful, now having this experience, but it's tough, it's hard,
Yeah.
and not grateful to the point where I'm saying, like, I don't deserve any kind of compensation, or like, you know what I mean, like, or to be validated in any way, like, like, I mean, I'm human,
Yeah.
I am human still, but I do know that God put me in this for a reason, and what that accountability looks like, they're already feeling it. I've seen it. When I went back to work, I saw some changes being made. There weren't things that, like,
Hmm.
where you could hold yourself accountable, like, and now we have like a version of anti succeed, so at least you have something written on paper of,
Right.
like, oh no, I checked this box, this box,
Right.
this box, so why am I not getting promoted, right? Like, so there were things that I had
Hmm.
talked about and brought up that I started to see implemented while going back, like, like different, like, oh no, you can't record on Teams no more, you can't do this on, like, right, even some of the ones that will
Hmm.
more so protect them than you, but you start to see, anytime somebody brings a lawsuit, anytime someone files a complaint that goes
Yeah.
all the way up, trust me, there is a change happening on the back end, right?
Absolutely.
And so it does matter. It does.
It does absolutely make a difference because, to your point, there were changes that I, heard through the grapevine, which
Yeah.
is undefeated, that, they that were made as a result of what happened to me and what I spoke out about. So, just keep in mind, folks, that you can make a difference, maybe not for yourself, but for the person that comes behind you. You speaking up can make all the difference for the person that comes behind you of whatever it is that you're dealing with in the workplace. So don't ever think that, well, nothing happened for me, so what was the point? There always is a point, because I promise you, every time someone speaks out about something, they have to make changes. They have to make adjustments because they don't want another repeat.
Absolutely. This is
So
actually a great
yes.
visual. So, and this is not about the lawsuit, but there was a job that I applied for. I
Mhm.
went through 7 rounds of interviews, like, right? Like everybody's like, you're amazing, you're this, blah, 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 blah. And then it comes down, and then they were like, well, and this was an associate director for, titled associate
Mm,
director for for diversity, equity, inclusion, but they would be reporting to the
right.
VP. So they're not reporting to a director, then that goes to the VP. You're the AD that goes to the
Right.
VP. So in my head, I'm already thinking like this should have been a
Mm.
director title, right? Like, like I'm already thinking that. So we go through the interview process, and then when they tell me
Right.
like the reason was like, oh, well, we're looking for someone with a little more like director experience.
Mm.
And in my head, I'm thinking, but the title is associate director, right? Like it's not director. I actually respond back and I said,
Right.
thank you for getting back to me. But I was like, this is the opposite of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, right? You're looking to pay someone at
Mm.
an associate director pay, but you want them to be a director, right?
Right.
In terms of experience. So I was just, when I tell you 2 weeks later, the same listing changed to director, and the increase was from $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay.
So while I didn't get that job, the next person that's going to get that job is getting that job and at the pay that they're supposed to.
There you go, folks. Do you see how that works?
But somebody does have to speak up.
Do you see how speaking up?
Somebody's got to speak up.
It absolutely makes a difference. And I think, to your point, even the fact, what I went through, even though I couldn't continue my legal claim, I wrote a book. Okay. The experiences that I went through, I said, you know what? I don't want someone else to have to go through this. So I'm going to write about it. And so, as long as you're using and channeling those experiences and, turning them into a purpose, and I think that's powerful when you can turn your pain to purpose and actually help someone else that comes behind you to avoid some of those pitfalls or get out of them faster. That is so powerful, and that's why it's important to speak up. And your speaking up might be writing that book.
Oh yeah, it's coming.
It
The
might
book's
be,
definitely coming.
Hey,
Cost of justice.
okay.
The cost
So
of
we
justice.
know the
Yeah,
book is
absolutely. So I did. I mean, it was big for me to because people were like, "Man, Zara, are you really talking about this?" So I did a TED Talk in February, and in that TED Talk, it was called "We Are Worth the Cost of Justice." And in the midst of the storm, because most people wait until after everything is over to do a flashback or recap on their experience. But I said there's something powerful and precious in sharing this experience in real time. I mean, there's not one run through that I got where I didn't cry, right? Like, even today, like I get hooked up every time I share the story because it hits you at different points, right? It's not always in the same space. But there was power in doing that because I really felt like God was saying, this time around, I'm calling you to be a walking testimony, right? Like I'm called, because how you got to spread the gospel, right? Which means that you got to open up your mouth, share what's actually happening. And most of these companies, the only thing they care about is their reputation, right? Like, so how can you fight somebody that only cares about their reputation in silence?
You cannot.
I mean, they got more resources. They got more, what do you call it? So, and that was the thing too. I also wanted to preserve me, because what we're not about to do is try to paint this picture with big jargon and little words and weaponize, right? Like me in your 240 pages of documents, right? Like that, then now that's what's out there. Like not my story, because I'm not sharing my story and my experience and what I face. Win or lose, like, a lawsuit at the end of the day doesn't mean that somebody wasn't harassed. It doesn't mean that somebody wasn't discriminated against. It doesn't mean that somebody didn't experience retaliation. It just means that the judicial system, which is very difficult, It is not easy, especially for the layman or a lawyer. Right, like, or a lawyer, like, I mean,
It
it's
is
not
not.
an easy thing to navigate through. So it's who knows how to weave the stories and ask the questions in a certain way and
Yeah.
manipulate, right? Like it's all those things where all you're thinking like that didn't happen, or I didn't say that, like, right, like I didn't mean that, right? Like, and twisting things, and
Yeah.
it becomes this whole confusing thing that, like, now you're just like, holy, like, like you find yourself in a situation. That's why so many people get locked up that don't deserve to be in prison, right? Like, and all these nonprofit programs
Yeah.
are getting people out 10 years, 20 years later because they shouldn't have been locked up in the first place. Who had the most money? Who had the best lawyer? Not necessarily who was telling the
Yeah,
truth.
that in itself is a word, because to me there's nothing more eye-opening than serving on a jury as a Black woman. I will tell you, it will 100% change your life. It changed my life. And I spent pretty much the entire month of July serving on a jury, and I did not have that on my bingo card at all for 2025. But I'm grateful for it because, to your point, it really, the best story wins, because we sat there while the attorneys were going back and forth and sharing things. But at the end of the day, we were only meant to look at the evidence. The evidence was all that should have mattered. But sometimes some folks are blinded by the story because one side's story was better. And so they felt like it was more convincing, but it shouldn't matter. It's the evidence. And so, to your point, what I love about this is that we are here, we are standing 10 toes down. We're not afraid because we stand in truth. Not, because I know some folks like to say, well, I'm going to speak my truth. No, this is the truth. Okay, we're speaking
The
the
truth.
truth. And so when you come from a place of truth, and you got your facts, you got your receipts, you got your evidence, you can speak unafraid because you have the truth on your side, and that is powerful. And so even though you're doing this, you're defending yourself, you're representing yourself, and this 5-year fight that we're still waiting to come to a culmination, but you're moving forward, and to your point, you're moving in faith. And that, to me, should, for any one of us who is out there who is on the cusp of thinking about whether or not I should do this, maybe I should let it go, maybe I should walk away, maybe I should go ahead and take the settlement in exchange for my silence. You are resonating so deeply for so many of us who can't fight anymore, or aren't, for whatever reason, aren't able to. You're continuing that fight for us. So I just want everyone who is on here, if you know one person, get them to go ahead and sign that petition, get the word out, because there's still a lot of fight left. And whatever we can do to help Zara to keep moving forward, we need to do this. We need to stand up for her. And, like you were saying, I think there's nothing more clarifying than when the rubber meets the road to see where your support is.
Absolutely.
And I think you have mentioned that. And it's so cutting too. It can be very cutting. And I definitely see that. And I think even for a smaller degree, just to see who's reposting the content, who's sharing it, who's engaging with it. And then you see other individuals who have these humongous platforms. I've got like maybe 1,000 or so, give or
Yeah.
take. And, but to me, it doesn't matter because, like I said, there's power in one. But then when you see other individuals who have these large platforms who can speak up and actually do more because they can reach such a much wider audience, and they're engaging with your content, and it's like, it's disheartening, but it's also clarifying. And I think it's more so clarifying than anything else. And I think sometimes I'm grateful for that clarity because where you stand. But I just, I think that the fact that you can still push forward, and I think, and I really believe this, I think for every person that you thought maybe was your support, there's going to be 7 more that are
Amen.
going to stand in the
I
gap for
receive
you.
that.
And I would 100% believe that. And I think, to your point, we're only just like a few months into to knowing each other. And I think that that's what makes it so amazing is because the way that we can connect because we, not just the heritage, okay, let's be clear about that. Okay, out of many
Yeah,
one
man.
people, if you know, you know. But aside from that, we have that shared pain and we connect on that level because we are you are us, like you are telling our story, and that's why it was so easy for us to connect because like that I was just there, like I was just there in my own situation. And also shout out, and I know she couldn't be here, shout out to Sarah, like because she's been
Absolutely.
doing a
The
lot of stuff behind
formation.
the scenes
Yep.
as
Out in
well.
Arizona.
And so, like, let's shout her out. Okay, Sarah, you are doing the thing, and we're sorry that we couldn't have you on here, but I know you're doing a million and one things. But we have to shout her out because we've been exchanging messages, sending text messages, and just kind of like, hey, this thing is going on over here, and check this over here. And so, and I know she feels the same way because she shared this. Is that we see ourselves in you, you know, and you you never look back sometimes on that moment and say I'm going to be able to look back and not think about it in a way that's painful or like feeling like I'm going to cry or like you still have like kind of the tears welling up in the back of your eyes sometimes because it was such a vivid and unfortunately traumatic experience. But that is like that is the Black woman experience in corporate America. It's sad to say. And I'm grateful for anyone who has never experienced it. Thank God. I pray you never experience it. But overwhelmingly for Black women in corporate spaces, I I dare to say beyond America because I've gotten some messages from people like, hey,
Yeah.
me too. I don't live in the US. So it's so heartbreaking. But because so many of us have lived it, there's an opportunity for us to come together and to support and hold each other up. And I think there's going to be so many more Black women that are going to stand in the gap for you. I'm claiming that. In fact, I know for a fact that you're going to you're going to exceed your
I
1,000.
believe it. I mean, we literally, it's been
It's
what, a week,
100%.
seven,
100%.
707 days. Like, and I think, every morning I wake up, I'm like, wait, 50 more? Like it's actually the thing that's kind of exciting and motivating through this now. And that's why I say,
Yeah.
like, sometimes I was like, what if I would have done this earlier, right? Like because there is some peace in it now,
Yeah.
like, but you're right, everything happens for a reason. And the truth is, this is where, the Supreme Court is where law is set, like, right, like, where precedent
Yeah.
is potentially set. And I'm aware that less than
Yeah.
10%, whether you're the highest skilled lawyer, typically only 10% of cases
Mm-hmm.
for the most part are reviewed, right? Like, and
Mm.
but to have come this far, to even have been
Yeah.
endorsed to speak, right? Most pro se litigants don't even get endorsed to
Yeah.
speak at the Court of Appeals level. And the fact that I was endorsed to
Mm.
speak and carry my case and write pointers, and to be honest, when I read
Yeah.
their brief and their response, I'm like, totally missed this part. Like, I was told it typically takes a month to 3 months to get an answer, and I got an
Mm.
answer in 10 days. So part of me is like, I mean, that's a little quick now. Like, right? I mean, like, so did you have your mind made up before, right? Like, like, as to what was going to
Yeah.
happen? I don't know the answer to that, but at the end of the day, the road has led me here, and I'm
Yeah.
10 toes down on advocating for myself and others, right? Like, because it's not just me, right? Like you said, it's all of us.
Yeah.
But if there's any right, there's any court that sets a bar, it's this one, right? It's this court that says, yes, we're going to look at new harm after retaliation as its own case, and we're making it clear that if this happens, you could bring a new suit, right? Like there's so much
Mm.
confusion with the law that it's like one person can choose, one person can
Right.
choose that. This is the Supreme Court is where they could clarify all of that. And that's the whole, right? Like, and
Absolutely.
and you don't really have pro se's make it this far, right? Like, and that's, I think, the other thing. I think in some way, God just said, like, I want people to know that whether you can afford a lawyer or not, right? Like, I mean, like you
Yeah.
still have a right to fight. You have a right to advocate for yourself. You have a right to speak up, and you have a right to be
Mm.
heard, whether you have a lawyer or
Yes.
not, because we're not all going to have the money to have a lawyer. We're not all going to have, and not all
Absolutely.
lawyers that can take you on are going to be able to, because there's only so many people they can help at one time. And that
Yeah.
perfect storm, when you have deadlines and timelines and jobs and children and life, right? Like, there's so many things happening that
Yeah.
at least this way, that you have a fighting chance and you have the ability to even start the time clock. So even if you're still looking to get a lawyer, you could file the claim by that 179th day, right? And then it gives you typically like another 30 days to like try to find an attorney, right? Or
Yep.
you continue to move along the process
Absolutely.
yourself. So sometimes you just have to find ways to keep it going.
Yeah. And to your point, you can absolutely file the EEOC claim yourself because I did. So, no one should feel like, oh, well, there's no way I can do that. I need an attorney to do that. No, you can
You
absolutely
file
file
that
the claim
yourself.
yourself. So just,
And there's different agencies, right? So there's different state agencies
yeah.
where you could put in claims as well. And then even when because
Yep.
with the EEOC, once you're now issued a right to sue, then you have 90 days. You still have 90 days to like your right to now get a lawsuit out. And that's the reason why I said like, so once you get to like that
Yeah.
89th day or even that 90th day, you could, if you don't have an
Hmm.
attorney and you want to at least still try to find an attorney, you could put in a claim, right, yourself, and then the attorney will amend it.
Yeah.
So these are things that we're not privy to learning and knowing. And that's like, like some
Right.
of the things that I've just learned along this process. So you just have to when my attorney left, I tried. I didn't realize, I was left in an uncompromising situation. I thought the brief was done. I thought all these things were done that weren't done.
Yeah.
And then now it's
Mm.
November, which means it's Thanksgiving. It's last quarter, Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Right.
Most of there's attorneys that said, "Oh yeah, you got a good
Mm.
case," but my hands are tied. Like, right, family time. It's the
Mm.
end of the quarter. Not taking on new cases until
Right.
February, right? Like all the things. It wasn't that I didn't have a case, right? Which is, of course, what the litigants try, right? The appellees, aka the defendants, try to say, like, oh, she's difficult, oh, she's that. Like they're going to narrative they want to
Hmm.
create. And once I came to mind
Right.
and told myself they're doing their job. At the end of the day, this is what they get paid to do. It's my job though to defend, right?
Right.
Like it's my job to ignore the BS and show up and be respectful and be honest and ask questions
Right.
and like kudos to you because I know you're working hard. And I'm sure that people probably even saying like, dang, this girl pro se and she still got you going, right? Like, like I'm sure you're probably dealing with that too. Like it ain't over yet, right? But you chose an Olympian, right? Like you chose an
Hmm.
Olympian to retaliate and discriminate. Like you chose an Olympian that
Yes.
says, this is bigger than me. And when God calls you to
Yes.
it, we all know that He's gonna qualify you and see you through it. And every time I look at some
Okay.
of these briefs, I'm like, I wrote this, like me and ChatGPT produced this, like. Because don't get it twisted.
Mm.
ChatGPT will give you some information now, but you got to ask the right questions. You got to go deeper. And
Yes.
I tell people, don't be ashamed to use these tools, the AI tools and the ChatGPTs, or download platforms like Just Answer and ask
Right.
questions. Because the more knowledge you gain, right, the just the better
Right.
you become, the smarter you become, the better you're able to narrate your own story, right? Like, and advocate
Yeah.
for yourself and others. I've been in a position to be able to help others, and that's a blessing in itself. It's a
Yes, it
blessing in
is.
itself to watch, because not everybody, I'm telling you this right now, the NDA thing is not the thing for everybody. Some people go ahead and sign the NDA. Go
It
ahead
is
and sign
not.
the NDA, collect your $40,000 and move on to the next, right? Go back to school. Like, even
Yeah.
if I get it, some people are in a position where life is really lifing, whether you have a family and you can't afford to, you got to keep working, right? Like, but
Right.
just by filing the claim, at least get the claim in, because when you get the claim in, even if you don't pursue it, at least now the next person behind you, if they end up in the same situation, they'll see that there was more than one inquiry about the same. person,
Yeah.
right? Or more than one inquiry about the same company. So make sure you at least get the claim in, right? Takes the exit letter seriously. Write a true resignation and send it to send it to them and send it to yourself and tell them the reason why. If you're not planning on working there anyway, it's not gonna hurt you. So let them know, because it's creating the paper trail for the future, right? And so when somebody else comes behind you and now they say, we want to see all the exit, letters of people of Black women, right? Then something now that is going to be requested, and they could sift through and it'll be like, wait a second, 12 people said that this guy, this, and this. So is Zara really wrong, right? Like, is he not Black women, right? And that's really what it comes down to. But if you don't do those things, you don't really give people coming behind you a fighting chance. And to be honest, they're targeting you anyway, right? Once you get to the point of feeling targeted, you are targeted, right? It's not going to change, right? It's really not going to change.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of like just what they say, like, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have that when, listen to that gut feeling, because a lot of times it's telling you what you need to be doing in that point in time. I'm going to really quick, I'm going to look at the LinkedIn and see if we have any questions in the chat here. Zelda, thank you so much. I've seen some messages from Zelda. Really encouraging. Hey, thank you for watching. So amazing. I love her messages. I'm catching up because I've got to look at it on my phone. Okay, so Zelda's asking where she can find the documentary. So let's
got that for you. Sent that to you.
Okay, so we're gonna make sure we put that in there, and then this is I think I'm gonna call this a rhetorical question, where she said, so Rocket would not support African American clients.
No, I mean,
we'll just leave that. We'll leave that.
Rocket does. I mean, at the end of the day, they're gonna give everybody a mortgage that tries to call and come through, right? And how each individual person feels, right? That's where you're gonna have a difference sometimes. I know for me, this is a personal thing. Like when if somebody calls me on the phone and the loan does not make sense, I'm not going to sell somebody a loan that does not make sense, right? But there are going to be some people that it's sales. They're going to try to push something and try to make you feel like it's the thing, and it's really not the thing. And that's the reason why I actually had so many repeat clients. I really had a lot of, because people knew that, I mean, over 100 reviews that they've graciously taken off the internet, right? Because they knew that we were going to get the truth, right? They what is going to be best for you. There was not one client that I ever had that I didn't treat them like they were my auntie, uncle, cousin, best friend, right? Because you don't want somebody to be able to get into a house and refinance, and then now they can't even afford it. They've racked up these bills again, and situation.
Exactly.
You don't want somebody buying a house that they can't afford or don't barely qualify for, right? So, and if they do, I at least want to make sure I'm educating you on all the options, and you make the best option for you, right? So.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, I think to that point, I think at the end of the day, money has only one color, green, and that's all people generally, corporations in general, I mean, that's what they care about. They may have some questionable practices, but that's a different story.
But I think what you might be getting at, Zelda, with asking that question, and this is public record because it was said, and it's even in my TED Talk. One of the things that I brought forth was I was on a task force, the Wealth Gap Committee, or the Black Wealth Gap Committee, right, internally, and one of the things that I had, when I read the Urban Institute in 2019 at the time, it had said that Blacks were having, there was a decrease in Black home ownership, and that Black people had a higher interest rate, almost 1% higher interest rate than everybody else. So that's where I remember when I was a banker at the company, I said, I just noticed we increased FHA rates. So at the time you're thinking well, why? Why we do that? So I questioned, and I said, in that meeting after getting threatened, right? I said, well, how about we pull the data, right? To see if we could be unintentionally, right? I'm giving a lie here, right? We could unintentionally be adding to the racial divide, right? And then before you know it, there was Northover. That's what I'm talking about. If you continue down this path, it won't end well for you. As we as a company decide to raise our rates, we're raising our rates. But the reality is, I know, like, you know, if more people, more Black people qualify or using FHA, and then that's the rate that you raise, then that's a rate that you're raising, right? Like, so that could be a problem, right? Like,
Okay.
and these are things that, once again, like, they didn't get divulged into. Like, I mean, I was gone before we could even look into certain things. But as a civilian that cares, as a Black woman that's also impacted by those, I mean, I pay my mortgage to the company, right? Like, you know, like, at the end of the day. So it's one of those things. It's educating people, and that's really what I'm in the
Right.
game for, is to educate and make sure people are empowered to make the best decision, no matter the color of your skin, right? Your gender or
Okay.
your race or your age. Like, you know, I would have some clients that would be like, well, I'm 90. Do I qualify for a 30-year mortgage? Absolutely you do. Like, absolutely you do. It doesn't matter how old you
Okay.
are, how young you are, right? Like, as long as
Yeah.
you qualify, you qualify.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so to your point. I love that, you know, and I think that's just something we do by nature. Receipts, okay, we're about the receipts. So it's like, okay, don't, you know, I think this is going on. Well, let's look at the data. Okay, what is the data telling us? Is the data telling us that that's what's happening? Then the data speaks for itself. And at the end of the day, sometimes that is all that people
Yeah.
want to know about or hear about. Like, you can say whatever, but at the end of the day, what does the
Yeah.
data tell you? What do the statistics tell you? And so I think that is in itself is really powerful. I'm going to look really quick. I'm curious to see where we are, because I saw a couple of folks scan. So I'm hoping we'll see where we are in terms of the petition. I'm just curious to see. 3 more. We're 710. See? Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to those of you who went ahead and signed the petition. Okay, and we're winding down. We have, like, because we can't stay on here forever, because, you know, we both have lives. But you know, we wanted to make sure we give you all enough time to have a conversation or ask questions, and also, even if you know, because the live stream will be available on LinkedIn and as well as on YouTube. If you have any follow-up questions, if you're watching the re-air, go ahead and leave those questions as comments. You can tag Zara or myself, and, you know, we'll be happy to answer it within reason. Of course, there are some questions that cannot be answered at this time, if you can, you know, realistically speaking. But if you are navigating a similar situation, if you have any questions about the EEOC or any questions about any of the things that we have talked about, do leave a comment, because those, you know, we will see that. We might not see it right now, but we'll go ahead and follow up with you all. So definitely keep bringing those in, because also your posts and your comments, it is really going to help push it and give it more visibility. We're trying to get eyeballs. Okay, we know there's some journalists that are out here. Okay, you guys are following this story. Go ahead and jump on it now. Some of y'all have a really big platform. I see what some of y'all work for. Yeah, I've seen it, because LinkedIn is telling me, and y'all over there being shy. Y'all need to go ahead and jump on. This is public record. Go look it up for yourself. We're not making this up. This is all in the public record. 100%. You could be breaking the news for your media organization. Okay, breaking news exclusive. Wouldn't that be sweet? I'm just telling you. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Oh my goodness. Okay. So looks like, okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but yes. Okay, Zelda, you are
Thank
doing
you,
amazing.
Zelda.
Thank you, girl, for holding it down. Okay. Power in one. I'm telling you all, power in one. Everyone counts. Okay. So thank you, Zelda. Thank you for those of you who are on YouTube, who are streaming this on LinkedIn. We appreciate it. We're gonna keep pushing this, because we're gonna keep making noise. Okay. The squeaky wheel. We're gonna be the squeaky wheels over here. Okay. We're gonna get this out there to as many folks as we can. And to your point, something we didn't mention before, Zara, we across the platforms, we've been pushing this content on TikTok, Instagram, all of the platforms. We're inching up to about 500,000. The press release that was put out on Deltic Media, it has nearly 200,000 views. So we look, people are out there
Yeah.
looking at this stuff. I need y'all to now just stop looking.
Yeah.
And
And Zelda, we'll connect. Zelda, I'll
do
send
stuff.
you and I'll respond to your email with my phone number, and we could talk, and anything I can do to help you or try to connect you. I'm here to help.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know that there's some folks that mentioned that they were about to, file their own lawsuit at their employer. If you have questions, if you don't want to leave them in the comments, that's totally fine. Go ahead and send. You can message myself, you can message Zara, as she said, and of course, be reasonable in the timeline because there's a lot of folks sending a lot of stuff. So just keep that in mind. We want to try to get to everyone as we can. We really appreciate your time. So I'm gonna shut up now because we have like about a minute and some change left. So I want Zara to have the last word and just give some words of encouragement to folks, and just like, if wherever you find yourself, just give us something for the journey that we can take and meditate and just be encouraged by as we depart.
The one thing I want to let everybody know is that we are responsible not just for advocating for ourselves, sharing our stories, celebrating ourselves, but also healing ourselves, right? And it's really, really, really important
Absolutely.
that you seek wise counsel, whatever that is for you, whether it's therapist, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a best friend, whether it's, mom, dad, significant other. Seek counsel and have the conversations, because when you silence yourself, this stuff just ruminates and builds up inside of you, and it doesn't end
Yeah.
well for anyone. So don't feel like you're a burden. You'll know which friends are listening and are intrigued, and which ones are not. And the ones that are not, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
I was just telling my girlfriend, I was like, yeah, I love you, but you're not the one that's going to sit here and have a conversation with me. But she's the one that's going to say, Zara, here's a gift card to go to the spa. Like, you need to relax, right? She's the one that's going to say, hey, let's plan a trip to get away this weekend because you need that, right? And that's just as important as the friend that's going to listen to me vent about what's happening in this case, or the friend that's going to strategize with me, right? Like, every single person in your tribe has a place. And if you don't have a tribe, right, because I'm aware there are some people that are really introverted, or maybe in a transition, right, where you're not in the tribe that you were in before and you find yourself in a new venue or a new place. That's where therapy is so important, right? Like joining different groups, whether it's like young professional groups, or investor networks, or different types of networks in your community. But get yourself locked in, because it is important to connect yourself to some sort of a source, right? And for me, I'm a believer. So God is with me. I mean, God is within me. So I know that I will not fail, right? Like, whatever is happening, this whole process is a win, right? And it continues to be a win-win, because I keep choosing my voice and I keep being amazed by the results of it. And so I
Yes.
look back and there's not one regret for not, for standing up for myself. And I tell other people that, it's at times I'm just like, man, I feel like I've helped so many people and they're done and I'm still going. like that to me sometimes is like frustrating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I know I got more evidence than they, right? Like than they do. But the reality is, it's everything is happening for a reason. And the fact that we're about to go
Yeah.
before the Supreme Court, where there's less than 10%, and
Mm.
God's willing, we're going to be one of the 10% that gets this review. It's a huge win, regardless
Yes.
of
We are
what even
claiming.
happens from there. And, pro se's don't normally
Yeah.
go this far. So this is to show everybody and anybody that the
Mm.
power of one, right? Like, it takes one person to have the courage that
Yes.
says, I'm going to pursue at all costs. And that's the route that I've taken, and respectfully, right? Because it's my right. And I keep saying the respectfully
Yeah.
aspect is because there's a term that the defendants used often, and it's public record. Like, they keep saying I'm a vexatious litigant or a serial litigant. How am I a serial
Mm.
litigant? This is the same topic that we're just elevating through the courts, right? It's not frivolous. If it was frivolous, right, like I wouldn't have any evidence, right? Like,
Mm.
if it was frivolous, the courts wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
endorsed me to speak. If it was frivolous, right? Like, but because I have the wherewithal and knowledge now to understand that, that's the reason why it's like I'm not vexatious and I'm not a serial. I'm executing my right, my human right, not just the right because I'm a Black woman, but my human right.
Absolutely.
And because I'm a Black woman, even more so. And and the trainings and things that
Mm.
will tell you that, our race is normally the one that gets probed into trying to settle sooner. Even if you have a great case, lawyers
Yeah.
will just be like, just go ahead and do this, right? Because they know that
Yeah.
majority of the time we're gullible enough to just take it. to take anything, right? Like you do see a difference between settlements versus one race versus another, right? Like you see the difference in how many cases get dismissed, one race versus another, how many complaints get filed, one race versus another, and these are so many things that like you just have to ask yourself, but on one hand, it's because it gets dismissed. On the other hand, it's because you didn't even give yourself the chance to get it dismissed, right? And this is me saying, I want when this is all done, that I can look back and said, I gave my all, right? Like I left nothing on the table, and then I'm going to live to talk about it all over the world and empower people. Right, that's what's coming for me next. Like my story's not over. This is just the beginning, and for all of us. You know, I can't wait to hear
100%.
other people's stories. I go out now and people have said, I've watched your TED Talk. I decided to speak back. I decided to negotiate my severance, and I made twice as much as they were offering me. I was able to do this, right? Because half the time I tell people, if they're willing to pay you twice as much, it's because they know they did wrong. they know they did wrong. So you might as well just ask for it, right? Like just ask for it, because you're being terminated, then now they're turning around giving you $40, $50, $90,000. It's because they know that they did wrong and they don't even want to bother going to court and dealing with it. So ask for what you deserve. Ask for what you deserve more.
Oh,
so you can end up with what you deserve. Because that's just how negotiation works.
That right there. Yes. And so to your point, it's about being persistent and staying the course. And I think you have that in spades. So we know no matter what, this is a win-win because your story is out there. You are encouraging and motivating so many people, and we cannot wait to celebrate.
And I will keep you guys posted. Cole's my exclusive, so anything that's happened is we going live. We're gonna be on live. We're gonna talk about it.
Look, guys, okay, we tried to give y'all the opportunity. Y'all heard it here first. The exclusives are coming to Select Media. Okay.
Absolutely.
So look, that's what happens when you don't jump on the bandwagon when you should. So anyway, but no, seriously, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Please keep pushing, keep supporting, keep pushing it out there. The QR code, but we're gonna make sure we're gonna keep pushing this every day. We're gonna put this in front of your face because we know that every single day more people find this. So we know that we need to get it out to more people. So thank you so much, Zara, for joining us. You have not heard the rest, and we will probably do this again very soon because look, we're gonna get this out here, okay? We're gonna get the word out, okay? Bottom line, and we know that there will be a victory coming. So thank you so much, Zara. Thank you for everyone who joined us, and keep the comments and the questions coming because we will answer, okay? Until next time.
Bye, everyone. Keep moving in faith.